Hey everyone! So we're talking about watches this week and smartwatches. I think we've all just generally agreed we don't like the new Apple Watch. It kind of makes sense to me. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan. I wouldn't go get it. I have had experience with some of the smartwatches. My boyfriend has a smartwatch that syncs up with his Samsung phone. I've had to borrow it a couple of times until I got a watch because I needed one for work. I think it'll be a while, even with, smartwatches becoming a thing. It'll take until it becomes affordable to everyone and it makes sense to everyone to get a smartwatch before we have to really worry about how it becoming as interactive as our cell phones have and just general technology, because for one thing, not a whole lot of people are really into the smartwatches just yet because it just doesn't seem valid. And I kind of am on that same train of thought. With my boyfriend's Samsung smartwatch, there's a few things I can see it being useful for, and really it's not something that there isn't already something there for, except for one of the two features. For one thing, you can have it set to your specific like height and pace and whatnot, and it'll track how many steps you walk, and it's like a pedometer that way, and it's part of the feature of the watch while being able to tell you the time and whatnot. But the one thing I do like about his particular smartwatch is that you can answer a phone call, and it's not like you're sitting there talking. It's like if you're you're trying to get to your phone and you know it's right next to you, but it's going to take you a second to get to it, you can answer that call on your watch while you're reaching for it, so that way you're not like sitting there, like if it's an important call that you know you've been waiting for, like it's a call from family that you really need to take or whatever, you can just swipe it and take it really quick, and that's fine. I think the idea of having to talk to your wrist to talk to someone is a little ridiculous. I think it's helpful for all of being like, hey, give me a second to grab my actual phone, and then you rummage through it and feel bad for the person because they probably are hearing you rummage through things with your watch on, and that functioning as your phone for the moment. But I think that's probably about the only useful feature I've seen out of smartwatches so far. Watching everybody else's videos and having my own opinions on it, I think the reason why we have this big resistance towards smartwatches, and I'm not trying to speak for everyone, I could be entirely wrong, from the kind of feeling I got from listening to Niall and Kevin and Luke, was that the problem is less about the technology existing, but allowing it to become something that's everyday, right there in your face, and it's invading like every facet of our lives, instead of having this ability where we can sort of tune off. Like Luke says, you can leave your phone at home, but people tend to wear watches everywhere because they need to know the time for one reason or another. They like, being able to tell exactly when they're allowed to clock off, or they like just knowing the time when they're out and about and spending their day, or it's just one of those things that it just becomes a part of your everyday life, and it's hard to kind of disengage from it. And it becomes really noticeable when you leave it be. For example, I have 2 rings on my fingers that, at least for like the past 3 years, I've been wearing consistently since I got them. I tend to notice after 10 minutes if I haven't worn them, because I have a natural tick where I tend to twist them if I'm bored and or really anxious. I just start twisting or fiddling with my rings, and when I start when there's just like that one moment where I feel my thumb go over my fingers, or like I go like this and I start to realize I don't hear that click, or I don't feel the metal against my skin, I realize I don't have them there, and it becomes like a weighted presence. And I think for a lot of people that's the way their watches are. They wear them all the time, regardless of necessarily how often they actually glance at their watches. But they're there and they're part of everyday life. They carry with you everywhere, and that, I think, is part of the problem that we think of with smartwatches, is that we have them there all the time, and it's different than like putting your phone on silent or like canceling notifications on your phone so that way they're not popping up all the time. But like if you have your watch, which is there with you wherever you go, for example, for like the example of like getting a Twitter notification that someone replied to you, like if you're in the middle of going to the bathroom, I'm pretty sure you don't really care, nor do you want to immediately respond to whoever replied to one of your tweets at that moment. It might change how people use their watches, or just maybe their awareness of how technology is becoming ingrained. I mean, there are already places popping up that are specifically for isolation vacation. There's no internet available, you can't really watch TV, it's like a technology independent area, minus like the obvious of like electricity so that way you can see your room and whatnot, but that's about all that they have there, so that way you can get away from like the constant notification, this constant awareness of the world. I think when it comes to that, it's not that people don't like being aware, because the internet has brought so many of us together, and there's so much of so many great things that have come through it, but it becomes, I think, a problem sometimes where you can see the whole scope of the world and everything that's going on, and you kind of just sit back for a minute and you realize it's one of those things that you can be constantly reminded of how small your place in the world is, or made to feel how small your place in the world is if you're not one of these people who's making a big impact or in an area where things are happening or whatever the case may be. And that's kind of what the problem of bringing it into your everyday life is. Like, everyone has those moments where they just need to be by themselves, where they have their phone in another room, where they have it on silent and it's charging and away from them, and they're just sitting there breathing, or like they're out in class and that's all they're doing is they're there and in that moment. And that's good, I think. We all need moments to just kind of be with ourselves, or be in the moment that we're in with other people around us. And that becomes problematic when you start integrating technology into an everyday type thing. Part of it might also be because we've all watched, I don't know if everyone on the channel has, but I'm just gonna, in a general sense, like watching WALL-E and seeing how everyone was just content to like play virtual things, and they had everything right there in their face, everyday kind of disposal, and they just kept doing it. And like the way that led, not that I'm necessarily saying that we could end up going that way. I mean, there's always a possibility that we could end up going that way, not necessarily saying that we are, but like this whole drive towards technology, I feel like it's sometimes like we just want to be the people in the spacesuits so bad that we're trying to get there, but not thinking of the repercussions, or not remembering all the things that came, all the problems and issues that came with it. And it's just finding that balance between where we want technology to go, how we want it to help us, and at what point we need to stop letting it help us and enable us to do things that may not necessarily be helpful. Back to the basis of this, like Apple Watch, I don't know. I think it's ridiculous when you have something that's worth $10,000 that's going to be sitting on your wrist, and how likely it could be to be broken. Because let's be honest, it's Apple, and we all know how their iPhones are. I don't want to imagine what's going to happen when you have this thing on your wrist. And I'm pretty sure they're not waterproof, at least, I don't know. I haven't looked a whole lot into it, mainly because I'm just like not interested, and I don't buy Apple products. I don't know, it's ridiculous to think of this one thing that's going to keep you so connected, that's just going to go with you everywhere. I mean, like, are we going to start sitting in movie theaters and like people are like, oh, please turn off your cell phones and watches? Like, how weird would that be? So I'd say no to Apple Watches, at least until they can do something more useful, I suppose, though I don't know what the usefulness would be. I don't know, I think watches need to be simplistic. I think that's part of the appeal to them, and part of the reason you have them on your wrist. Like, the reason you have bracelets is because you like them and they look pretty. It's not because they're, like, you can have bracelets that are like functional in the sense like they're a pedometer, or like they help monitor something for your health, but past that, why do you really need something on your wrist that can serve the same function as the thing that's in your, as the phone that's in your pocket?